All right, good afternoon, traders. Today is May 28, 2025. My name is John Carignan. I am the lead instructor here at the BYOB Trading Room. Hey, let's go take a look at some charts today. That's some crappy price action today. I'm going to tell you about that. All right, so price action gapped up. All right, we had a nice little rally into, see this breakdown candle high right over here. So we rallied right into that breakdown candle high. We took our profits right in that breakdown candle high. Okay, then we had a 10-minute downtrend under VWAP. We traded that until, well, it subsided right here. Okay, right on 589 support. All right, so we traded that, puts right into there. Okay, then we had a 10-minute uptrend coming in through here. Everything was looking good. Let me just say that T2122 at that time was in the buy zone, not in the buyer's chop zone, was looking good. T2123 was still all green through here till we got this red that showed up out late in the afternoon. 3-bar chart, FNGU, everything looked good. All right, we looked like we were going to rise even higher. Okay, we did not. Okay, price action came in, and then somehow some news got a hold of price action. We had some FOMC minutes at 2 p.m. I don't think those affected the market much at all. FOMC came out and basically said that they're not going to really take any action till they figure out what the administration's going to do. So they're kind of waiting to figure out what's going to happen with tariffs, no tariffs. Tariffs on, tariffs delayed, tariffs projected, tariffs negotiated, tariffs, you name it. It's all about the tariff, okay? The Fed can't do anything till he figures out how much inflation the tariff's going to add, all right? Because if you're going to add more cost onto products and services that we buy here in the U.S., okay, it's just going to gum up the works, okay? So he can't do anything till he figures out what the president's going to do, or till the administration is done with all their negotiations and everything is ready to go, okay? Other than that, it's going to make it very difficult for him to, just going to say, try to combat inflation, all right? Because he doesn't know what he's dealing with until we figure it out. So he's waiting, and that's all there is to it. There's nothing he can do. He's got very deep concerns over the whole tariff talk, all right? And it's pretty much what I said it's going to be, for the last 2 or 3 weeks now, okay? And I kind of agree with him. He doesn't want to look like a fool, all right, and cut rates, then blast them back up. And I get it, all right? He's waiting to figure out what's going on. It's got a very difficult job as it is, and then you throw this sidebar into it, and it just messes everything up. Anyways, that's it. I mean, and I'm not against the tariffs either. I'm just saying that, the tariffs have a goal in mind, all right? And that is to eliminate tariffs on our stuff that sells into foreign nations, all right? We're just doing like little tit for tat, all right? You take yours off, we'll take ours off, okay? So I'm not against the tariff thing. I'm just saying that it's hard for the markets to justify anything until, there's some certainty in the air, as in what are interest rates going to be? What are tariffs going to be? What are the costs going to be going forward? Okay, so it's very difficult for the market to gauge that, and I wouldn't doubt it if we do have NVIDIA earnings after the close. If price action comes all the way back down to 575, I would not doubt that at all if that happens. All right, so there's price action for SPY. Okay, on SPY we got 10-minute downtrend coming into the close. Try it again, 10-minute downtrend coming into the close. 2-hour chart. 2-hour, still got a 2-hour uptrend coming into the close. Daily chart, higher low, higher high. Closing over the bullish trap, closing over the 17. All right, up here in quadrant 4, that's bullish, still in an uptrend, higher lows, higher highs. Again, price action above the uptrend line, over the all-time high anchored VWAP. Again, the opportunity is going to be in those 10-minute uptrends over VWAP, all right, that are inside those 2-hour uptrends, that are inside those daily uptrends, that are inside those monthly uptrends, all over, all of that, all over the all-time high anchored VWAP, which is the pink line right here, and above the uptrend line. So there you go. That's where it's at. SPY. Two-day chart, still in a downtrend. They have to take out the all-time high in order to negate it. 3-day chart, same deal. They got to take out the all-time high. Okay, that's the first high you come to that's above the 17. Okay, in order to negate the downtrend status. Let me just say, it's in a downtrend, but it's not moving down. It's moving up. Okay, because look at this. We went all the way from quadrant 1 on the 3-day chart, and we're up here in quadrant 4. Okay, you go down, you give it up, and more, all right, that's bullish. All right, on the weekly chart, same deal, got to take out the all-time high. Okay, they took out this low, they took out this low, that low, and that low. Okay, they made lower lows. So now they got to make a higher high. All right, well, that's the first high to come to. It's the all-time high. Okay, again, it's in a downtrend, but it's not moving down. Okay, monthly chart, you can see right here, big tail candle right there. Monthly is still in an uptrend. The first low to come to below the 17 is right here. Okay, until we take out that low, we're going to remain in an uptrend. Unless, of course, we set a lower high and then come back through and make a, we got a higher low now. Okay, if we take out this low, we'll have ourselves a downtrend below 486. All right, we'll see what happens here. So there's the monthly chart. Monthly still in an uptrend. Weekly downtrend but moving up. 3-day downtrend but moving up. 2-day downtrend but moving up. Daily is in an uptrend and moving up. And holding the higher ground up here in quadrant 4. That's bullish. All right, 2-hour uptrend, 10-minute downtrend into the close. All right, so there's SPY. Game plan really didn't manufacture anything today, okay? It was all pre-market activity that was played out. So we had from the open, let's move this over. We had green erases red right over the top here, right over 591.80. We traded that all the way up into 592.59. All right, took our profits, and then we had red erases green underneath 591 right there. So we had 10-minute downtrend coming out of that after tagging that peak under VWAP here, and we traded that all the way down till the noon hour. All right, and then we had an uptrend that we bounced off of the support area and then back up to there. And ever since that, it's been just kind of sideways for about, 2 hours, 3 hours here. Did nothing. And then I guess here we got some news that came out regarding, I guess it's software. Chip software stocks sink on report. Trump ordered halt to China sales. So we'll see what happens with that. So we're not even going to sell to China. That's not good. All right, that was probably a big customer for all the chip stocks. Not being able to sell to China is not going to be good for them. And that's not going to help out the market because technology is usually the leader for most of our rallies. And chip stocks are the technology. All right, so there we go with the 2-hour, the 10-minute, and the daily. Okay, the game plan was irrelevant because we were relatively flat all day today. Let's take a look at QQQ. Peek at it on the daily chart. QQQ daily chart. Something looks different. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's go over here. Okay, higher low, higher high, just like SPY. Closing over the trap, over the 17, over the uptrend line, over the all-time high anchored VWAP. Up here in quadrant 4, that's bullish and in an uptrend. Let's take a look at Diamond Dow. Higher low, higher high, closing over the trap, over the 17, over the all-time high anchored VWAP, over the uptrend line, over the midpoint, over the downtrend line. Not in the upper third. Okay. Yesterday they closed up there. Today they closed below it. So Diamond Dow just neutral, and in an uptrend, higher low, higher high. That's an uptrend. Let's take a look at FNGB. FNGB doing great. Again, price action, higher low, higher high, closing over the trap, over the rising 17. That's the green dots, over the pink lines, the all-time high anchored VWAP, over the uptrend line. Up here in the quadrant, the upper third, that's bullish. All right, making higher lows. Here's a low. There's a higher low and higher highs. There's a high, made higher highs. So that's an uptrend. Up here in the upper third, that's bullish. That's FNGB. IWM. IWM got a higher low, higher high. Closing, I'm going to call it inside a bullish trap. Over the 17 EMA. Underneath the all-time high, the pink line, anchored VWAP, over the uptrend line. Under the midpoint, that's neutral. It's not in the lower third. It's not in the upper third. So it's neutral. Price action is making higher lows and higher highs, still in an uptrend, just neutral. They need to get on top of all-time high anchored VWAP. Okay? Just can't seem to get it done. They've had 2 weeks here, and they just can't get it done. Not like SPY and QQQ. All right, let's take a look at technicals. Well, today we came out of the overbought zone. All right, transition through the buy zone into the buyer's chop zone. Another visit back to the buy zone. This is a 15-minute chart. Managed to make equal low right there at the end of the day. All right, so that's not very bullish, setting in a lower high and an equal low. That's not very bullish. But we are in the buyer's chop zone as opposed to the seller's. So that makes it a little bit bullish, but not very bullish. Only because it's not like one item. It's about the group, what they did as a group. And as a group, they made a lower high and an equal low. All right, so there's T2122. T2123, bullish gap up. That's amazing. All right, T2123. Bears never fill the gap. That is a bullish outlook. All right, you can see green almost from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Then came the software news, and then things started to fall apart right there. We got 3 red candle bars at the end of the day. Still, bulls managed to keep the gap open. Weakness on the bears' part. Got consolidation over prior consolidation. That's a bullish environment. Okay, let me show you that so you can see it. Okay, consolidation over prior consolidation. See that consolidation up there? We're on top of it. So that's bullish up there. Plus we got the bullish gap. All right, that didn't get filled. That's bullish. We're up over the 200 SMA. That's bullish. We are up over the downtrend line. See that downtrend line? That's bullish. We have moving from a low up to a high and held the higher ground. That is bullish. So on the 15-minute chart, we are bullish. That's looking good. Let's go to the 3-bar chart. 3-bar chart, 3 more green candle bars. We're up over the 200 SMA. We're up over the downtrend line. 3-bar chart, there's a high. We made higher highs. Okay, so that's an uptrend on both the 15 and the 3-bar chart. Price action, though, on the daily chart, okay, we're not quite there. We got to take out this high to get a daily uptrend. Still haven't got that daily uptrend. Not in, we haven't had a daily uptrend since, I'm just going to say February. All of March, okay, we failed to make a higher high. Okay, half of February, all of March, all of April, all of May on the daily chart, okay, and all of May. So there's 3.5 months right there that T2123 daily chart has been in a downtrend. Okay, not saying it hasn't been moving up, but it hasn't made the higher high, and that's what counts. Okay, the higher high. You can see price action. I'll just show you. Okay, so there's the daily chart. Okay, we'd have to find a candle that's above the green 17, and that's the first one you come to. See that in mid-February. That's the daily chart. Okay, I'll go back to the 3-bar. Okay, so we're looking good on the 15. We're looking good on the 3-bar. Nice bull flag hanging out here. Like to see a move up over those prior all-time highs. We'll see what happens. Okay, so there's T2123 right there. That's the 3-bar chart. Okay, that's bullish. It's looking good. Okay, we're just not there on the daily chart. FNGB, all right? Again, you've got consolidation over prior consolidation. Okay, you get consolidation over prior consolidation. Okay, that is a bullish environment. Okay, all of this would be prior consolidation. We're consolidating up over it. We got a bullish gap that we did on the 27th. Okay, that still hasn't been filled. You can see price action is up over the rising 200 SMA. That is bullish. That's also a bullish environment. Having that bullish gap that hasn't been filled by the bears, that's a bullish environment. And you can see price holding the higher ground up there. That is also a bullish environment. So FNGB looking good. Up over that rising 200, bullish. Up over all-time high anchored VWAP, that's bullish. Up over the uptrend line, that's bullish. Let's take a look at a few sectors. Start off with XLE. All right, start with XLE on the daily chart. Okay, XLE having a bit of a struggle. XLE is in an uptrend. They got themselves in an uptrend because they made, here's a low, they made a higher low. There's a high, they made a higher high. So they're in an uptrend. But notice they keep closing candles down here in the lower third. They might be in an uptrend, but they're not moving up. Not in the last week and a half, at least. Okay, so XLE, today was an outside day, which is a higher high and a lower low. Notice they closed at the low of the day. They closed underneath a bearish trap. They closed underneath the 17. Sorry, still recovering. Closed underneath downtrend line 1, underneath downtrend line 2, underneath this 12-month high anchored VWAP. I think that's the all-time high, yeah. Underneath the all-time high anchored VWAP. And they're down here in the lower third, so that's bearish. All right, they are in an uptrend, but the problem is they're just not moving up. They haven't moved up in probably a week and a half, 2 weeks. All right, so there's XLE in the lower third. That's bearish. Let's take a look at USO. USO yet to make an uptrend. Okay, they still have to make a higher high. They haven't done it. All right, price action is in the lower third, so that's bearish. So they're still in a downtrend because they made, here's a low, they made a lower low. There's a high, they're making lower highs and lower lows. Price action is still in a downtrend. They're in the lower third, so that's bearish. They're underneath this 3-year high anchored VWAP. That's the post-COVID high. They're underneath the midpoint. Again, they're in the lower third, and they're in a downtrend. So not getting any help for the energy sector from the USO. UNG. UNG, there's a low. We made a lower low. So that's a downtrend. Price action makes lower high. There's a high. We made a lower high. There's a low. We made a lower low. There's a downtrend there. Price action, closing in the lower third, that's bearish. Closing under the downtrend line, that's bearish. Closing under this weak 12-month high anchored VWAP, also bearish. Closing underneath the midpoint, that's also bearish. So nothing, no love from the UNG, no help for the XLE, all right, with UNG. Actually looking at, I got to say, it looks like a head and shoulders right now. That would be the head, left shoulder, that would be right shoulder. So getting no love from UNG or USO right now. You can see price action on both of them, closing in the lower third. That's bearish, all right? Let's take a look at GLD. All right, GLD has got a, let's zoom in here. We've got a higher low and a higher high. Closing inside a bullish trap over the 17. I'm just going to call it over the all-time high anchored VWAP. But get this, we're making lower highs and lower lows. So we're in a downtrend, all right? But we're up over the all-time high anchored VWAP. That's huge, all right? So we're consolidating up here in quadrant 4. That's bullish, and we're in a downtrend. Remember, it's just a label, okay? We're in a downtrend, but we're consolidating up here in quadrant 4. That's bullish. And this thing's pretty hot. This thing could probably cool off for a couple months in addition to what it's already cooled off. All right, so there's gold up there, quadrant 4. That's definitely bullish. Again, you're over, closing over the uptrend line up here in quadrant 4. You're making higher highs and higher lows. No, you're making lower highs and lower lows, so you're in a downtrend, but you're up here in quadrant 4 over that all-time high anchored VWAP. That's bullish. All right, let's take a look at silver, SLV. All right, silver got a, let me zoom in, it's hard to see. Lower high, lower low, closing underneath. That's a bullish trap. See the 3 on top of the 8. Closing under the bullish trap, but over, see the dots, over the 17 EMA. Over the downtrend line, that's bullish up there. Okay, silver, there's a high over the 17 right there. We made a higher high, so there's a uptrend on silver. We're up here in quadrant 4, that's bullish, and in an uptrend, closing on top of that downtrend line, okay, breaking that downtrend line, and up over this 6-month high anchored VWAP, which also doubles as a 12-year high. Okay, so that's a 12-year high anchored VWAP as well as a 6-month high anchored VWAP. So that's bullish up there in quadrant 4. So there's silver, all right, in an uptrend, all right. Having some struggles though, not quite as, doesn't quite have the strength that gold has. So I guess there's not a lot of demand for silver. So there's silver. Let's take a look at SMH. All right, SMH, all right, was in the upper third. Okay, we gave it to them this, this morning. Price action, higher low, higher high. Closing in the neutral zone because they're not quite in the upper third. All right, so in the neutral zone. But look at this, over that bullish trap, over the rising 17, over the all-time high anchored VWAP. So price action for SMH, just neutral. And of course, they've been flip-flopping, okay? They go up, and then they get knocked out. And then they go back up, and then they get knocked out. And they were back up there yesterday, all right? And then they got knocked out today. So, I mean, they keep walking in and out of the threshold right there of the bullish upper third up there, okay? So SMH, I guess with today's news, not going to help them much at all. All right, so SMH, again, bullish up here, but not, it's neutral. It's neutral, but definitely acting bullish in that it's making higher lows and higher highs. So that's an uptrend, and they're holding that higher ground up here as opposed to giving it all up. They're holding the higher ground. They're just not holding it high enough to be in that bullish upper third. Okay? Keep in mind, they're over the all-time high anchored VWAP. That's not easy to do. And they are up over the downtrend line. Okay, that's not easy to do. So SMH trying to get it done, but having its struggles. Okay, a little leaner, a little meaner, a little stronger is Big Brother XLK. All right, it's technology sector. Okay, XLK, notice much more strength than SMH up here in quadrant 4. That's bullish. Higher low, higher high, closing over the trap, over the 17, over the uptrend line, over the all-time high anchored VWAP, over the midpoint. Everything looking good. XLK, bullish, holding that higher ground. That's bullish. All right, nice bullish environment there. Okay, so XLK, uptrend, higher low, higher high, up there in quadrant 4, that's bullish. Let's take a look at XLF. XLF, higher low, higher high, uptrend, over the all-time high anchored VWAP, bullish. Today's price candle, higher low, higher high, closing under a bearish trap, but over the rising 17. Okay, so kind of like neutral on that. Like to see them when they close over the trap. But over the 17 is good. All right. We're over the all-time high anchored VWAP. That's not easy to do. All right. We're up over the midpoint. We're up here in quadrant 4. So that's bullish and in an uptrend. Let me just say, if they make a lower high and take out that low, they will lose uptrend status. All right, that's XLF. Bullish up here in the upper third, that's bullish. And over the all-time high, anchored VWAP, that's the pink line. Okay, notice they're in the upper third, that's bullish and in an uptrend. Okay, but in jeopardy of losing it if they break that low. Okay, let's take a look at IYT. IYT, higher low, higher high, closing under a bearish trap, kind of just like XLF. Closing over the rising 17 or the flat 17. Up here in quadrant, excuse me, I'm still recovering. IYT, closing in the neutral zone, okay? Not in the upper third, not in the lower third. So they're in the neutral zone. Closing underneath all-time high anchored VWAP, that's the pink line. They closed under the trap, but over the 17, over the uptrend line right there. IYT just neutral. It's in an uptrend because they made a higher low here. There's a low. They made a higher low and they made a higher high. So they're in an uptrend, but they're just neutral. They are doing not real bad, holding the higher ground up here above the midpoint. That's looking good, but just still neutral. Can't quite get it done. All right, I'm going to take a look at some NVIDIA beats earnings and revenue as data center jumps 73%. Wow, that's going to help out the market. So let's go take a look at SPY. Thank you, Alan, for sharing. NVIDIA double beat. All right, love that. That means revenue and bottom line. Okay, love it when they beat double beat. That's right, Fido. All right, he said double beat, so that usually means net profits, all right, as well as gross revenue, right? All right, so let's take a look at SPY, and then we'll look at NVDA. Okay, SPY not really getting a whole lot of juice from this right here, okay? Not a lot. Yep, revenue and earnings per share. Thanks, Fido. All right, so you can see, let's see the pre-market. And let's go here and we'll put it on the 5-minute. Okay, so you can see price action zipping back to VWAP. Not quite enough juice to get there though. All right, so there's SPY zipping back up towards VWAP. We like that. Okay, let's take a look at NVDA. And wow, they put in a Diddy freak off candle right here. So here you go up there. Price action up over all of this consolidation. That's bullish if you don't know what that is. Okay, here's consolidation and they are up over all of the consolidation. That is bullish. That is a breakout right there. Okay? Hope they can keep that going into tomorrow. Hope they can keep that going into the weekend. Wait, hope they can keep that going into next month. All right? That would be nice. All right, that's it for me. Unless there's any questions. If there's no questions, I'm going to say good night. Thanks for hanging out with me today. It was a tough day. We did make some money. I think some of you made some money. Did have a nice candle right off into the rip into the morning, and then one into the afternoon, and the rest of the afternoon after 11 o'clock kind of sucked. It just sucked the air out because it just went sideways for many, many hours, and then it broke down on that news. All right, so that's it for me. Everybody have a beautiful evening, all right? I'll see you guys tomorrow at 8 o'clock.